Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, Control Center for Oracle WebCenter Content. Our agenda today, after a few brief introductions, I'm going to walk through some background and use case on Control Center. Then I'm going to go into a deeper overview of the Control Center product, spend a good amount of time actually walking through a live demonstration of Control Center, and then at the end I will open it up for questions. So my name is Kim Negaard. I'm the product manager here at Fishbowl Solutions for Control Center. And I've been working with Fishbowl and the Oracle WebCenter product for about 5 years. I'm really excited to have you all here with me today and show you the newest product from Fishbowl Solutions Control Center. Before we dive into that, I just wanted to mention a couple of administrative items. First, questions. We will be taking questions at the end, but you're all welcome to type your questions into the chat box as you think of them during the seminar. So at any time, feel free to enter your questions. We'll leave some time for questions at the end, and any questions that we don't get to, we will follow up with directly after the webcast. And I also wanted to mention that this session is being recorded, so everyone who's joining today will get an email next week with a link to the recording, as well as everyone who's registered for today's webcast. So with that, we're here today to talk about Control Center, which is the newest product from Fishbowl Solutions. So Control Center is a controlled document management application, so for managing things like policies, procedures, work instructions, etc. And it's built on the Oracle WebCenter Content platform. And the major advantages of Control Center are around user experience, streamlining the authoring and review of these policies, procedures, etc., and then automating the overall control around these types of controlled documents. But before I go too deep into those advantages, which I'll talk about again in a little bit, I wanted to give a little bit of background. So how did we get to this place where we're at today? Who's Fishbowl? What are we doing with controlled document management? Fishbowl Solutions, for those of you who aren't aware, we've been around in the Oracle WebCenter space for about 16 years. And our heritage and our founding has really, we've always had a lot of customers in the manufacturing space. We've always had a lot of customers who work with quality documents, document control, quality control, and document management. And so about 5 years ago, we released a product called Policies and Procedures Suite. Some of you on the call may be using this product today. And so Control Center is really the rebranding and the next generation of that Policy and Procedure Suite, which we've had on the market for some time. And so Fishbowl has deployed solutions around controlled document management in a lot of different industries, from manufacturing to healthcare, food, public sector. And so with Control Center, we've really taken the best of the past products, the past projects, what we've done with Policy and Procedure Suite, and combined that with the latest in web technology, responsive design, and Web Center integration. And we've rebranded that next generation product as Control Center. So why Control Center? What does it do? What does it address? Control Center is really designed to address the needs around controlled document management from the perspective of a number of different users. So from the end user perspective, a lot of the things that we hear and that we heard as we interviewed customers and talked to customers, both Web Center customers and non-Web Center customers around controlled document management, are things like, oh, the systems are really out of date, they're clunky, they're hard to use, it's not easy to pull up a procedure if I'm out in the field and I need to work on a piece of equipment, or the Web Center interface isn't super intuitive if you're not really a technical user. So those are some of the things we've heard. Also things like the documents aren't easy to find, we don't really know, there's not one single source of truth, one single system where all these documents reside. So those are some of the things we address from the user perspective with Control Center. From a more reviewer or author perspective, there's things like how tedious it is to keep all these documents up to date, to keep them in sync. A lot of times people will have review cycles where they're keeping, spreadsheets and checklists of when was this procedure last reviewed, who approved it. It can be very tedious. And then we also heard things about, we'd like to have standard templates, but we don't really have them today. It's difficult to maintain. Maybe I don't always know where to go to find the latest template. So those are also things that we looked to address with Control Center from the author and reviewer perspective. And then lastly, from the auditor or the manager and oversight compliance perspective, we hear things like, we need to make sure that outdated copies aren't used by mistake. We need to make sure that we lock down or put some control around printed copies so that someone doesn't come in for an audit and we're out of compliance because someone has a printout that's from 2 years ago. Things like making sure that it's very easy to see the history of a particular document. How did it get approved? Who approved it? When did they approve it? And so from an oversight perspective, those are the kinds of issues that we look to address with ControlCenter. And so that all kind of comes together to look at how do we reduce risk for lawsuits, make sure that your documents are in compliance, and do it in a way that's easy and intuitive and a modern user experience. So that's kind of the framework for how we got here. Who really cares about this? A lot of organizations care about this. Manufacturers, construction firms, healthcare, government, professional agencies, retail, pretty much every company has sections of these documents that they need to control. They need to make sure that they're approved and that the latest versions are being put into the hands of the end users. And so these are the kind of applications and use cases that ControlCenter addresses. It's things like a quality management system, work process. There's a number of different compliance programs that we've worked with customers in the past to address everything from ISO 9000 compliance to OSHA or HIPAA or safe quality foods or total quality management. So these are all the kinds of use cases that we were thinking about when we designed ControlCenter, and that we've worked with in the past to implement controlled document management built on Oracle WebCenter Content. So I also wanted to give a couple of examples of customer use cases that we've had in the past. Like I said, ControlCenter is really the next generation rebranding of the product that we used to call Policies and Procedures, and that product has been available on the market for some time. So we have a number of customers who we've already worked with to address some of these similar challenges. And so, for example, one of the customers that we worked with was a large producer of dairy products. They make cheese and yogurt. They actually make the cheese for most of the fast food chains in the U.S. And so they were rolling out a Safe Quality Foods initiative. And Safe Quality Foods is a certification that organizations can request that verifies that their food is produced and processed and handled according to the highest quality. And so in order to do that, they needed to have document control around a documented process for how they're handling food, things like the safe temperatures, etc. And so they have 30 different plants across North America and over 7,000 employees. And by working with Fishbowl and WebCenter Content and policy management, they were able to roll this out in less than 90 days. And for them, one of the critical pieces was ease of use. And this was something that, ease of use is something that was very important as we look to create the next generation in ControlCenter. Because one of the things that we heard was, if you have plant workers in these food processing plants across the country, they are not necessarily super tech savvy. They don't want to see a bunch of Oracle WebCenter menus that have to do with more super user functionality that the contributors might care about, but the end users don't care about. And so it was important to them to be able to surface these documents up, provide a way to browse through the library of procedures in a way that was simple and intuitive and free of any extra clutter. So that was one of the things that was important to them. Another one of our customers is a global aluminum manufacturer. So their story is they were rolling out a new plant in China and expanding their operations to China. And so as part of that, they decided it was time to really replace their old legacy policy management system with something newer that could handle all of the requirements of localization and all of these different geographies. And so they worked with us to roll out a policy and procedure solution. They also do custom orders, so they're manufacturing aluminum to customer specs specific for a particular order. And so all of the review around all of those specs, all of the work orders, the procedures to manufacture it, they had some complex workflow requirements, so we worked with them closely to make sure that all of the documents got routed appropriately and that the proper approvals could be tracked and traced. This project also took less than 90 days to roll out across 3 different continents and 6 different languages. So for them, it was very important to be able to have localized interfaces and support a multilingual implementation. And then one other example that I wanted to share is from a leading producer of fertilizer. So obviously with fertilizer you have a lot of potentially hazardous chemicals that you're working with in the manufacturing process. And so in this case, having procedural documents around proper handling, proper waste disposal, that's required. That's not something you can choose whether or not to do. You have to do it by law. And so they worked with Fishbowl to roll out a compliance initiative and a document control process around all of their procedural documents. And for them, things were important like periodic reviews. So, for example, OSHA requires that every year you have to review all of these hazardous material handling documents and make sure that they're still accurate and up to date. And you have to be able to provide a history to show that it was reviewed on an annual basis and who reviewed it. So we worked with them to implement automatic periodic reviews, to enhance the out-of-the-box Web Center workflow history and history reporting so that they had a better audit trail of the documents and when they were reviewed, their periodic reviews as well as their initial approvals. And then they also worked with us around the importance of differentiating an in-process document versus an approved document. So it is very important that a draft of a procedure doesn't accidentally get used as though it were an approved version. And so using the watermarking that comes with Web Center out of the box was something that we helped them to do so that if you're viewing a draft, it's very clearly marked that that is a draft and you don't mistakenly think, oh yeah, this is the standard how I'm supposed to do this. So those are just some examples of some of the things that we kept in mind and some of the legacy that led us to where we're at today in terms of bringing together all the best of our past projects, our past products into this new release, which is called ControlCenter. And so, as I've already alluded to, ControlCenter is an application for managing controlled documents. And this is built on Oracle WebCenter Content. So it uses Oracle WebCenter Content as the back-end repository. It leverages a lot of the other capabilities of WebCenter, and I'll talk about that in a second. It also has a dedicated user interface. So one of the things that became apparent as I was interviewing a lot of customers and we were looking at what does it look like to have a quality document control system? What would you like to see in it? There are a lot of things that Web Center does that aren't quality document management that users didn't want to see when they're trying to specifically manage controlled documents. So by creating a dedicated user interface, we were able to mask a lot of the extra things. We were also able to provide a more modern and updated look and feel and support things like responsive design and mobile access. So I'll show some examples of that in the demonstration. And then in addition to upgrading and enhancing the usability through a better user interface, we also extend a lot of the core Web Center functionality to better and more fully support specific things around controlled document management, such as workflow and auditability. So the three main advantages around the intuitive user experience, authoring and review, and document control is what I'm going to talk about next. So I know many of you on the call joining us today are currently using Oracle WebCenter Content. Not necessarily all for controlled documents, but in one way or another. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Oracle WebCenter and what it is, but I know we have a few folks joining us who are less familiar with WebCenter. So I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview. Oracle WebCenter Content is Oracle's enterprise document management system. It's a document management repository. So this is the foundation for ControlCenter. It's what provides things like metadata and security. A couple of key pieces that we definitely leverage with ControlCenter that are really important for controlled document management are things like workflow. So being able to put a procedure into the system and route it to different people for review and sign off. Being able to define the business logic around who reviews which documents. Another important piece is version control, so making sure that you have one released version that someone sees, and as that gets updated, all your links still point back to the latest release, while meanwhile being able to have your authors who are editing and updating a new release, and once that gets approved, push that out to your users. So the version control is very important. And then conversion is the other one I wanted to mention. So out of the box, you can configure Web Center so that when you check documents in, PDFs automatically get created, which for controlled document management can be very important, especially as we look at how do we bring this out into the field, how do we put this onto mobile devices. You're on a mobile device, you don't want to click on a link and have a Word document download and hope you have an app that can open it. So being able to convert to PDF and very quickly open documents up right from the browser is important. One of the differences between something like ControlCenter and a niche control document management solution is because it is built on the Oracle platform and it has that underlying Oracle repository. It also makes it easier to then integrate these documents and use them elsewhere, whether it's with ERP or a website or a portal. So I mentioned that one of the major advantages of ControlCenter is the user experience. We spent a lot of time looking at what makes for an intuitive, modern user experience for browsing documents. And so there's a number of key things that we included as part of this piece of the application. One of them is, of course, just purely the fact that we completely redesigned the interface. We decided to build a standalone interface specifically for controlled documents, and we kept in mind a lot of principles of modern user interface design, and one of those being mobile. So the ControlCenter interface is completely responsive. I'll show this in the demonstration. So whether you're on your phone out in the field or whether you're at your desk reading your procedure, the interface is going to adjust so that you can get at the documents in a way that's easy and convenient. We also found that it's very important to have a dashboard. So out of the box with WebCenter and a lot of other tools, when you log in, you may not immediately know, what am I supposed to do, where am I supposed to go? That's something we heard from customers a lot, that especially at the end user level, that people wouldn't necessarily know what they were supposed to do. It wasn't obvious to them. So we wanted to have a dashboard where, based on your role, which gets into my next point, you're going to see the things that you care about. So if you're an end user, you're going to log in and you're going to see your favorites and you're going to see the latest releases. If you're a reviewer, you're not only going to see those, but you're also going to see things like, here's all the documents that I need to review, here's all the things that are assigned to me, things I need to take action on. So making it easy to log in and know what's waiting for you. And then lastly, browsing documents. A lot of customers think about this as maybe a virtual table of contents or a digital version of the old 3-ring binder policy manual. So having those virtual tabs or those virtual folders to be able to slice and dice this large pool of documents based on plant or manufacturing process or department, all of those things, and being able to do it in a way that's simple is very important. It's one of the things that a lot of customers struggled with when they're trying to use the out-of-the-box Oracle WebCenter interface specifically for these more controlled, structured documents. So having an easy way to do that, which I'll show you in the demo, was another important piece. So all of this user experience, the focus we put on that, is really around empowering users to make it really easy so when they need to find something, they can find it regardless of device, regardless of if they have a lot of technical background or training. So making it easy and intuitive. The next major piece of ControlCenter was around streamlining the authoring and review. So not only do we upgrade the interface to just make it more modern and current, but we also add specific features and functionality that address the kinds of things you need to do to manage controlled documents. So one of them is document templates. As I talk to customers, a lot of the times I heard that they want to have standard templates, but they don't necessarily, or people don't know where the templates are. And so with ControlCenter, we've integrated templates right into the application. So you can manage your templates in ControlCenter. You can also create new documents from a template. So if I'm going to go and I'm going to check in a new procedure, I can actually do check-in right from template, and that's going to start my procedure not from a blank document, or I don't have to go out onto the file share and find some template that I think might be the old one, or find a local older copy and start replacing it. I can actually start always from that latest and greatest template, and then you have the most up-to-date version. So that's directly integrated into ControlCenter. Another thing we heard was around synchronizing the document data, so the metadata and the properties. A lot of times for controlled documents, you want to have a header block that has things like document number, review date, document owner, and so making it easy to either take that information out of the content server, out of ControlCenter as metadata, and push it into the header of the document, or go the other way, take it out of the header and push it into the metadata. By being able to do that, now you don't have to enter it multiple times, and you don't have to worry that you have conflicting data where it says one thing in one place and something else. So now you're out of compliance, you don't know which is the real data. So being able to bidirectionally sync the metadata, the properties of the document between the native file and then the properties that show up in ControlCenter. We also added something called scheduled reviews, and I alluded to this a little bit with the OSHA example around needing to review documents every year and make sure and sign off that they're still accurate. And so with WebCenter out of the box, you have workflow when you add something to the system, but you don't necessarily have a way once it's been out and released and in use for, say, a year to say, you know what, I need to queue this to be reviewed again and to make sure that it's still okay to be out in use in the system. And so with ControlCenter, we give you a way to do that. You can automate that process. You can set up rules for how often certain documents need to be reviewed, who needs to review them. Those things are going to show up on the dashboard that I talk about as your queue of items waiting to be reviewed, and I'll show that in the demonstration. So being able to automate that review process was important. I already talked a little bit about Microsoft Office integration with the metadata synchronization. We also do integration in the form of comparison. So if you have two revisions of a procedure that were in Microsoft Word and you want to compare them, we integrate with that. So you can actually click compare. That's going to open up in Microsoft Word with track changes, and you're going to be able to see exactly what changed between, say, version 3 and version 4 of a particular procedure. And then lastly, we have some enhancements to the workflow and the options that you have with workflow. So you can actually search documents that are in workflow. You can customize the messages. A lot of times if you're reviewing something, you may want to show a specific message saying, please review this procedure, make sure that it aligns with this particular regulatory requirement. This group, based on the first step or the second step, needs to check certain sections of the document. So rather than just displaying some very generic, please review this document and approve or reject, you can give your reviewers specific instructions of what are they supposed to do with this thing that's in their queue, what are they looking for when they're approving it. And you can do that based on workflow or based on steps. You can have different criteria for which documents have what messages. And then lastly, the comments on the workflow. We actually allow you to maintain and store all the comments that are left as things are being reviewed. So out of the box with WebCenter, once something is no longer in workflow, the comments that were left during the review process are lost. So there's no audit trail, there's no history of what comments were left. So with ControlCenter, we capture all of that and make it easy to go back and see for all the revisions, any review history and comments that were left. And so this is all around really keeping content up to date, making it standardized, making it easier to have timely reviews. And then the last piece that I wanted to mention is automating the document control. So this is things like automatic notifications, and that's whether you need to review a document, maybe it's been sitting in your queue to review for 3 weeks and it's coming up on its due date, so you need to send a reminder, or you need to send it to your manager to say this person hasn't reviewed it, it still needs to be reviewed. All of that can be automated. Also alerting the user base. Maybe you want to send a notification once a week to users in a particular plant for any documents in that plant that got updated. Send them a weekly update on this is what's new. You can automate all of that. We also allow you to associate and supersede documents. So if you have, for example, maybe a piece of machinery that is being deprecated and you're bringing in a different new piece of machinery that you're going to be writing a new procedure for operating, you may want to supersede that old one with the new procedure and being able to keep a link of this new procedure replaces this other one, and have all that as part of your control system. So we have that option within ControlCenter. I talked about watermarks a little bit before, with like the ability to have draft and released as watermarks, which is definitely something that we allow you to do in ControlCenter. We also have enhanced the out-of-the-box watermarking capability to do print-only watermarking. So if you have, a lot of times customers may want to watermark only when they print something that says, expires on and the current date or who printed it, so that basically any printed document is only valid for 24 hours, and it's very obvious after that that you're looking at an outdated copy, or it might be outdated, so don't reference it. Which helps keep the scenario where an auditor comes in and someone finds one from 2 years ago that's no longer valid and someone's referencing it. I talked a little bit about document history. Document history is something that we fully capture in ControlCenter, and so you have that, all the revisions, who approved them, what comments were left, if you did any periodic or scheduled reviews, to be able to see that, a year later someone came back around and said this thing is still valid. So all of that is tracked and captured. and then making the configuration flexible and distributed. So we have a lot of the things you'll see in ControlCenter are fairly configurable. We put some effort into not only the user experience from an end user perspective, but the user experience for administrators and super users. So to be able to distribute that out to a quality manager or a business manager to have control over, specific rules or custom messages that they want to display. And so all of these things are really intended to help automate the document control, to eliminate opportunities for human error or requiring people to remember to go do something. And then if the need does arise, making it easier to go back and audit and track how something got into a particular state. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo. So you can see here I am in my dashboard. Right now I just logged in as an end user. So I'm logging in as an end user. This is what I'm going to see. I have a welcome message which can be configured. You can provide alerts. Maybe a particular plant is going to be down for maintenance on a certain day. Maybe you want to provide a getting started message or your logo. So this module can be modified. But then in addition to that, I'm going to see things like my favorites for quick reference, documents that I'm subscribed to, latest releases, and all of this is responsive. So if I switch my window here and I make it small, you'll notice if I'm viewing it on a phone, this is what I'm going to see. So it's very easy to pull up ControlCenter and quickly get to my favorite documents when I need to reference them on the go. We also, if I make it a little bigger here, you can see the tablet view. So if I'm pulling this up on a tablet, it fits very nicely and I can see all the information that I need right at my fingertips. So you also notice because I am an end user, when I switch to a super user, I'll have a lot more other options. So we really tried to limit it and make it easy and intuitive. Now as I log in, if I don't immediately see if what I'm looking for isn't maybe one of my favorites or a latest release, the primary way I'm going to interact with ControlCenter is either through browse or through search. So the browse navigation is what I was talking about earlier, that you can kind of think of it as a virtual table of contents or a virtual folder structure if you're used to interacting with like a file share. Some of our customers have implemented this to basically mirror their legacy file system structure. But the difference being is because it is all based on metadata, it's much more flexible. You can slice and dice. You can get at documents in different ways. So one group may want to look by plant and then manufacturing process, and someone else may want to look by department and then type of document. So you can slice and dice in many ways and have one single copy of a document that can kind of reside in virtual many different folders. So if I search for this here, I can see all the procedures that are in North America. If I'm looking for this hazardous waste procedure, I can open up this panel and easily see all the properties of this document. So here's a thumbnail. I can see the metadata. I can see any associated documents very easily. Now, if I'm not sure or I want to filter down, I also have multiple ways that I can search. So if I want to search any browse level, you can search within. So if I know I'm looking for hazardous, I can search for that. I can also use this quick search. This is going to search across all of the documents in ControlCenter that someone has access to. And ControlCenter will absolutely respect the existing security that you have in place in your organization. So users in ControlCenter are never going to see things that they wouldn't be able to normally see in the Oracle WebCenter core interface. And then we also integrate with profiles. So if you are using document profiles, you can specifically select which of those do you want to bring into ControlCenter and expose into ControlCenter. So if I want to do a more advanced search, I can go up here and search. If I know I'm looking for a manufacturing procedure, I can select that. These will also respect any security that you have. So if certain users can only view particular profiles, they're only going to see the profiles that they have access to. So if I know that I want a hazardous is in the title of the document I'm looking for, I can easily search for that and find it this way as well. And now I can add it to my favorites so I can get to it easily next time. Now when I go back to my dashboard, I'll see that document shows up in my favorites. I can open up this little info panel and see the properties. I can see any related documents. And from any of these views, I can simply click on the document to actually view it within ControlCenter. The other thing that we've exposed to all users, end users, and administrators alike is the ability to personalize their view. So something that's not super easy to do in WebCenter content, but it's something a lot of people like to be able to do, is to change what they see. So you can do this at an admin level across your system, but then every user has the option to come in and change their view. So if I want to see department as part of my favorites, I can easily choose whether I want to see it on my table view or my list view, which is the condensed view that you see on mobile. And I can save that, and now when I go to my favorites, I can see what department these procedures and documents apply to. So it's very easy to do. We also allow any of these lists of documents to be exported to Excel, so if you need to download them for reporting purposes or to pass on to an auditor, it makes it really easy to export all that information out of ControlCenter and pass it on to someone else. This is kind of a preview of the kinds of things someone might be able to do as an end user. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log in as myself as a super user. And you'll immediately see the difference. So now I'm in as a super user, someone who can review and author documents and control the ControlCenter configuration. And so I have a bunch more modules that appear on my dashboard. For example, the first thing you'll see here is a document status summary. And this is a quick snapshot of everything that's in the queue for me to take some kind of action on. So I have 3 documents in workflow. I have 16 documents that are scheduled for me to review on the scheduled review basis, and of those, 3 of them are overdue. So what I'm going to do first is actually show you the process of checking in a new procedure, and we're going to walk that through kind of the life cycle of the document. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to choose Add. And now again I'm presented with the different profiles for the kind of document that I want to add. So what I'm going to add is a manufacturing procedure. And there's 2 ways that you can add documents in ControlCenter. One is from a file and the other is from a template. So with a template you can actually choose, I'm going to start a brand new procedure and I'm going to do this based on a template. So you may have a procedure template. These can be different based on profiles. So you may have a procedure template that shows up here. You might have different policy templates that show up for other profiles. You also have the option for whether you want to, right now as a user, I can come in and say, do I want to choose from a template or do I want to choose from a file? Some of our customers have locked this down, and so we have configuration options. If you want to say, all I ever want to let people do is check in from template. I always want to know they're starting from a template. I don't want them checking in, miscellaneous things. Then you can easily configure ControlCenter to restrict the check-ins to always require them to choose a template and start from a template. So I have a document that's ready to go. I'm actually going to open it up here in Microsoft Word so you can see it. So this is my procedure that I have authored, and you'll notice in the header I have just kind of a placeholder where it says automatically populated. So you'll see this, I'll get filled in when I check it in. I also have a procedure summary which I have authored as part of writing this document. So I'm going to point those 2 things out. I'm now going to check this in and give it a title. So this is my aerial lift operation procedure. And it applies to North America. I have the release date. I also have the review date. So the review date is used for the scheduled reviews that I talked about. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. One of which is what I'm showing here, where you actually show this field. A user can choose, the date that they want the procedure to be due for review. But the other option is to hide this field and actually default it to, say, 1 year in the future or 6 months in the future. So you have both of those options. I wanted to show it here to kind of point out that this is what's going to trigger that document 1 year from now. I have it set to 1 year from now to be due for review. So 60 days or 30 days ahead of that, whatever time frame you choose, it's going to notify me that this document is due for review. I need to go check it out. I need to go look at it and make sure that it's still valid. And I'll show that with a different document that I already have in here. And then you'll notice right now the summary here is blank. This is where you also have the option to associate existing documents, or if there's a document that this one supersedes, you can choose that. You can also do it after the fact. I don't have any for this one, so I'm just going to go ahead and check it in. And now what it's going to do is it's going to parse the document and pull that metadata out of it, and then it's going to sync that metadata bidirectionally. So now when I go you can see this document is now ready for review, and when I open this up, you'll be able to see that. So this summary right here was just extracted right out of that document, and now appears easily in ControlCenter for me to see a summary of what is this procedure about. You'll also notice I can see, what workflow this is in and what step it's in. All of this is very configurable, so you can choose, which fields do you want to see, and it'll respect any profiles that you already have configured within WebCenter. So if I open this up for review, now I can see my document. If you'll notice, this header information already is all filled in, and if I actually were to download the native file, this is also filled in the actual Word document itself. So it's not just the PDF, but it's both. It's actually in the native file as well. So this information will always stay in sync between ControlCenter and my Word document. From here now I can look at this document and make sure, okay, I need to review this document and make sure that it's still current. You can notice I have a specific message here telling me that I need to review it for accuracy with our organization and regulatory rules, and I think this looks good, so I'm going to say, this is approved as long as we can roll out by May 1st. And now I'm going to approve this document. So I go back to my dashboard, and I can see it's still in workflow. It's in the two-step workflow. Generally, this would escalate to someone else to approve, but for the ease of demonstration, I have it going back to me again. So now it's in final review. If I want to review this again, I can open it up, and you'll notice the comments that I left in the previous step show up here. So that was something that a lot of customers had requested to make it easy to see that history. When someone leaves a comment, we want to let the next person see that comment so they can take it into consideration. So it's easy to do that. We also provide the information to get to the content information, go see the document history, go see the workflow information. I think this looks good, so I'm going to just go ahead and say OK and approve this document. And now you'll see on my home page, it shows up here under my latest releases. So the other things that show up on my dashboard are my additional documents in workflow as well as my scheduled reviews. So the scheduled reviews here, I have 16 of them. I can see this full list of all the documents waiting for my review. I can also see just the ones that are overdue, so I really need to get on those. So here's my list of documents. If I want to review this one, personal protection laboratory procedure, I can just click here to open up the review, or I can view the properties. And this is going to launch in the review screen. Now this looks similar to what I just showed with the workflow, but it's actually a little bit different because this is the scenario where this document is already released. It's out there, people can find it, they can read it, they're actively referencing it. But because it's 1 year out or whatever time frame, it's due for its scheduled review. So I need to go and look at this and make sure that it's still okay to be used or that it matches, that there's nothing in it that needs to be changed. And then from that, I can make some decisions. So I can say, no changes necessary. I can check it out and revise it. If I do that, then it's going to go from there back into the normal review process. So if there's 3 people that need to approve changes to this document, it's then going to go on to those other 3 people. Or if this document is actually, obsolete, we're phasing it out, maybe it's something that doesn't apply anymore, you can actually expire the document and set a date for it to be pulled out of the system so that it'll go into more of an archive state where end users are not going to be able to find it, they're not going to be able to search for it and reference it by mistake. So I think this one's okay, so I'm going to say no changes necessary. At this point I can say when I want it to be due for review again, so I'll pick a new review date. I can leave any comments, and these will all be tracked, so I'll say still looks accurate. And I will approve that document, and now it's out of my queue, so if I go back to my home page, I have one less thing in my list. If I open up the document information for this procedure, I can actually see all of that history. So this is the detailed document information page. I have all the history of every revision, any associated documents. I can see all the workflow history. So you can see the initial comments when it went through approval, as well as the periodic review comments as I went back and reviewed it after the fact. And this is actually for every single revision. You have all of that history. We also integrate with 11G digital signatures. So if there's any signatures on the document, electronic signatures that come with WebCenter content, you would also be able to sign the document, integrate that into your workflow, and see those signatures here. So the last thing that I wanted to show is just give you a little snapshot into the ease of configuration and administration with ControlCenter. So because I'm logged in as a super user, I also have access to the settings. And I'm definitely not going to go through all these, but I just kind of wanted to give you a flavor of how easy it is to kind of change and modify some of this. So if I go into the browse configuration, that's this menu over here. And right now I have one browse level that's browsing by department, and then content type, and then region. So you can see that here I have those 3 levels. This can use any of the option lists that you have defined in Oracle Web Center. So if I want to add a new node, I'm going to call this browse by type. And I'm going to say, yep, I want to open this by default, and I'm going to sort by content type and then by region, and save that. So you see that immediately appears over here, and now if I want to look at all the procedures in North America, it's very easy for me to do that. So this is kind of a summary of everything you saw: the user experience, the responsive interface, the ability to have a landing page dashboard jumping off to things you quickly need to be able to do, the review process both from an initial workflow and then a periodic basis to schedule things for review every year or every 2 years, and then the ease of configuration, and that's something that not only IT can do, but you can optionally roll that out to other sub-admin users to take some of that load off IT and put it in the hands of the people that know specifically the business logic that they want to apply to your environment. So now that we looked at ControlCenter, I just want to talk about kind of what it looks like to roll this out. So ControlCenter can be implemented on new or existing deployments of WebCenter content. So if you already have WebCenter content and you're using it, maybe you have your procedures in there, maybe you don't. Maybe you're using it for invoices or digital assets, or you have contracts in there. The way we've developed the ControlCenter product is to be very flexible. So you can choose, which content types do you want to bring into ControlCenter, which profiles do you want to expose, which workflows apply to ControlCenter content. So it's not an all or nothing experience. So you can have your quality documents, your control documents managed in ControlCenter, and you're not going to interfere with other things that you may already be using Oracle Web Center for. We also have options available if you have legacy systems where you store your quality documents today, whether it's an older system or a file share or SharePoint, some other system, and you want help migrating those and bringing them into ControlCenter. That's definitely something that we've worked with other customers to help them do, and along the process looking at scoping and design. So looking at what do your business process look like, how do we map that to workflow, how do we map specific things like scheduled reviews to business logic, and which users need to review which documents, help you design your metadata and security to work with this kind of a use case. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, because it's a question that I've gotten from other customers already quite a bit, is so this is a dedicated front end. What you saw in the demonstration, it's all running on Web Center in the background, but it's obviously a different front end. But this is installed as a Web Center add-on component. So there's no additional servers. It's not like the content UI that Oracle just released in 11.118. It's actually a separate server that you set up where you run this other interface. With ControlCenter, that's not the case. You install it on your existing Web Center server, so there's no additional servers that you have to maintain or use for ControlCenter. And it's also a Fishbowl supported product. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Fishbowl products, we have a product support team, we have a product support portal. So anything from Fishbowl that's a supported product, you're going to get access to support, ongoing enhancements, any bug fixes. As Oracle is releasing updates to Web Center, you're going to get updates to ControlCenter that map to and support the newest versions of Oracle Web Center. So because it is a productized offering, you get all of that as part of the package. So with that, I want to leave some time and open it up for questions. I can see the question thing blinking, so I know we have a number of questions in the queue here. So one question is this a custom component that you can apply to current documents and workflow processes, or is there additional customization that needs to be done? So it is installed as a custom component, but it will work with current documents. So if you have documents already in your system, if you have workflows already in your system as part of it's more configuration than customization, you would identify which document types and which workflows you wanted to be able to access through ControlCenter, and you would immediately be able to do that. So there wouldn't, in that case, be additional customization that would need to be done to be able to use this with existing documents and existing workflows. There's a question about this metadata synchronization. So there's actually two questions kind of related about that, so I'll kind of address those both together. So the metadata synchronization works with Word documents. It also works with PDF documents. I think that was one of the questions was specifically about PDFs. So yes, you can sync between PDFs or Word documents. Another question was around Word documents. Do you need to have a specific template in order to use the synchronization? And the answer is sort of not really. So there's really two ways you can do that. If we're talking about inserting the metadata into the header of the document. One is you can say, regardless of what header's in your document today, blow that away and put the standard header in there. That's one option. The other option is to use the like the form fields. So you can say anytime you see the Microsoft Office field called, you know, document ID, put the DDoc name into that field, and in that case you wouldn't have to have in either of those cases it wouldn't be super rigid tight formatting, but you would want to keep in mind when you design it which of those two approaches you want to take. There's a question about version support. This is supported on Oracle WebCenter Content 11G, and you need to be running 11.118 or above. There's a question about the architecture. So it is completely built on the component architecture. It is a custom component. There's a question about, does it require Site Studio? No, it does not require Site Studio, and it does not require Site Studio to be enabled on WebCenter for it to work. There's a question about, does it require additional specific metadata for ControlCenter? Not really. So we've made it pretty flexible so that you can choose, like for review, the scheduled reviews that I showed. We don't force you to create a field called review date. We allow you to pick of any date field what do you want to use as your review date. So if you already have one in place that you want to use, you can choose that one to use as your review date. If you don't have one, then you could create a new one as part of the implementation to use to trigger those reviews. There's a question about, where do you put ControlCenter if you don't have an existing server? Wouldn't you need a server then? So maybe that was responding to the question about not needing an additional server. So just to clarify that, you need an Oracle WebCenter Content server to run ControlCenter. So it runs as an add-on, it runs as an add-on to WebCenter Content. So you do need a WebCenter Content server. If you don't have one, you would need to purchase a license for WebCenter Content that you could install ControlCenter on. You don't need any additional separate servers in addition to WebCenter Content, but you do need a WebCenter Content license and a WebCenter Content server where you would install ControlCenter. There's a question about the scheduled review. So the notifications for the review, do they go to the author, or could you send them to a group or a list in case the author is not there? And the answer is you can definitely send it to a group or a list. So you can configure if you wanted to send it to just the author, if you wanted to send it to the author's manager. I mean, you can configure who you want it to send to. So if you have an alias that you want to send to the entire an entire department or maybe a group of team leads, you can send it to them. So yeah, it's very flexible in terms of which documents get sent to whom. So it's not just the author that it would send it to. There's a question about profiles. How does this work with profiles? Maybe you can follow up. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but it does fully support profiles. So when you view content info for a document in ControlCenter, if that has a document profile attached to it, the metadata that you see is going to respect that profile. If you're checking a document in and it's using a check-in profile, then any of the settings around which fields show up on the check-in page, any default values, any derived values, those are all going to be respected and enforced within ControlCenter. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Does it integrate or support Oracle OAM? Yes, so we don't do anything specific to around the authentication, so it's going to use whatever configuration you have already set up. So if you're using OAM with WebCenter Content, then that's what ControlCenter will use as well. So it's just going to use whatever you have in place with WebCenter Content. So if you have a single sign-on solution configured, it'll use that. Does it support any custom metadata? Yep. So if you have any custom metadata fields that are already created, any of those can be exposed in ControlCenter, used within ControlCenter. There's also a question about supporting other customizations that are defined in WebCenter. That one's a little bit trickier. We can definitely follow up with you specific on that. It's going to depend on the nature of the customization. Obviously, things that are like UI customizations in the core UI with ControlCenter having a separate UI wouldn't necessarily show up, but then on the flip side, if there's back-end customizations, ControlCenter may not have any play with those. So I can follow up with you on that question. That piece is definitely going to depend on what customizations we're looking at, but from a metadata perspective, absolutely, you can use whatever custom metadata you already have in place. And I should also mention that ControlCenter does support DCLs, so if you're using DCLs, those also will be respected both from a check-in, but also on the metadata on the left. So as you're creating that browse navigation, if you have DCLs that you want to use to build that out for those filtering options, it'll respect DCLs and allow you to filter with the proper relationships. There's a couple of questions about URM. The ControlCenter interface is not specifically integrated with URM, so if you have, I can definitely follow up with, there's a couple folks asking questions about URM. I can definitely follow up with you after the webcast more specifically, but it's not specifically designed to integrate with URM. There's a question about clustering architecture. So if you do have a clustered WebCenter content environment, you would need to install WebCenter content on both nodes of the clustered environment, or you would need to install ControlCenter, on both nodes of the clustered environment. There's a couple other questions around the UI or what you're seeing. So the UI is it's not using ADF, and it's not using the content UI. It's a separate UI from an architecture perspective. It's installed as an add-on component, and then all of the pages you access separately from the core UI. So we don't, there's some questions about, like, does it change anything with the core WebCenter interaction? And the answer is not really. The only change to the core UI is we add a button from the Browse Content menu to be able to get to the ControlCenter interface if you're in the core UI. But other than that, there's nothing that gets changed or overridden or limited by installing ControlCenter that would stop you from using the existing regular content server interface. And related to that, any documents that you do expose within ControlCenter, we don't limit you from also using them within the core interface. So if you have a procedure that's in WebCenter, you can access it in ControlCenter. You could still access it in the core interface and check it out or check it in and do things like that. So we don't stop you from being able to do that. There's a question about customization. Can you customize the look and feel, icons, colors, etc.? And yes, you can customize it. So you could work with us to have customization to change, the color of the header or the look of the icon, the look of, things like that. So yes, the architecture that we use when we design ControlCenter does support customizations, whether it's look and feel customizations or whether it's like I want to add another widget to the dashboard. So you can work with Fishbowl and we can help figure out what the next steps would look like to do something like that. But in general, the architecture that we use for ControlCenter is such that if there's additional features or look and feel that you want to adjust, it does support customization. There's a question about ControlCenter versus Content UI and what are the differences or the benefits. So from a purely UI perspective, ControlCenter versus Content UI, a couple of the big differences are the responsiveness, responsive meaning mobile, so as you change the size of the screen or as you consume the ControlCenter interface on different devices, so if you're on a phone versus on a tablet, it's going to automatically adjust to be suited ideally to that interface, whereas the Content UI is not going to do that. A couple other things, using Content UI, all of the documents open in new tabs, and you can't use like the back and forward button in the browser just because of the way that they designed it. You can't easily link to different pages because of the way the URLs work. So with ControlCenter, you can do all of that. You can use back, you can use forward, all of that more traditional way that you would use a browser. All of that is fully supported with ControlCenter. The other thing from a more use case perspective is obviously with ControlCenter, there's a bunch of features that we have in there around things like scheduled reviews, document history, and none of that is available from the Content UI. So from a what's supported in terms of use case, that's obviously a lot more robust from a controlled document management perspective. So there's kind of both of those pieces. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.